Welcome back to the Art of Non-Discrimination and your host Christian Fanley Ramsey. So part of what I want to elaborate on here is the step back. So we have come to think that the highest form of intelligence is a sort of intellectual intelligence, a knowing about the world. Now, it doesn't just mean the intellects. It also means that knowing facts about our world is the highest form of intelligence, and we consider that if you have cultural facts about the world, knowing how China works, knowing how America works, knowing how these complex and chaotic systems work, having a description or narrative that is seemingly convincing, all of these are what you could call perceived facts about the world. And so, of course, we as a species are right to value this sort of knowledge, this sort of intelligence, because what it means is we get to look out at the world which is utterly empty without our minds. And what I mean by that is seeing a dog barking. Hearing that is literally just sounds bouncing against your eardrums. And so there is no meaning to it. But of course, over interaction, over evolution, over cultural understanding, all of those different things comes preconditioned responses and imbued value. So the whole act of growing up is the act of gaining facts, or you hope to be reliable facts or heuristics about the world. And so, of course, it seems obvious that people who have a large quantity of facts, especially about things that are necessarily helpful and practical, as well as not practical, but interesting, such as knowing how gravitational waves works. We consider this a form of intelligence. And in some ways, some of us consider it one of the highest forms of intelligence. But I feel that we lose a higher form of intelligence by prioritizing this limited form of intelligence. So if we look at computers, we can easily see that their intelligence, or having facts about the world, vastly exceeds ours. Even our own collective intelligence will be surpassed by computers in terms of the number, the quantity of facts about the world. Now, we also have something called predictive modeling, right? In fact, our brains can be posited as prediction machines. As Anil Seth has said, we are literally hallucinating reality. How do the hallucinations come about? They come about through best guess. So each frame in the image that we're seeing, which is kind of a computer vision metaphor, analogy, is predicted, right? And so, as prediction machines, if we think about computers, why do we need prediction machines? If we could just have, if it was possible to have every fact about the world installed, why would you need to predict anything? You have every fact. And it's because there's things in the world that are utterly indeterminable. In fact, we find out, and Einstein revealed this to us, and many other sages, that the basic Um, Even the most basic atom is indeterminate, and we call that probabilistic, meaning it isn't clear. There are sides that say, well, a atom can be in several places at once, or it could be probabilistically in all those different places, but likely upon recording in a single place. And of course, that depends on our instruments. So, as we have gone deeper into the nature of reality from the perspective of the object, we have found it to become actually more complex, less determinable, less deterministic. And that's not a problem. It's just we're finally getting to a point where we see this, the chaotic, somewhat random, probabilistic nature of reality. And so then, of course, it means that that's why a notion of getting all the facts right about the world could never work. And of course, in the non-dual traditions, this was already very clear. The Buddha uh, said that existence has these markers, that really he was talking about this amazing concept called emptiness. Um, and emptiness is, in a way, how things exist, as Zopa Rinpoche would say. Meaning that if we see a object in our perception and we have a meaning, there are actually likely as many meanings as there are subjects. But this is very, very difficult to grasp. We try to create meta objects like culture, or that have probabilistic views, or have majority views, so that the world can be mapped out more evenly. We can say this culture has this story. But of course, the eerie truth is that culture has as many stories as there are subjects. Now we can roughly try to collapse those stories into a few stories, but in reality, we're doing a kind of squeeze, a kind of data compression at which we will lose some of the fidelity. And then we end up with a finite number, or a more reasonable number of stories within that culture. Now, if we try to directly compare that culture to another culture in terms of stories, the problem becomes that our collapsing of one culture and another culture, and then comparing them by using single metrics, is very erroneous if we draw the conclusion that they are different or the same simply based on these metrics. So we also like to look at the variation. So what this is basically telling us is there is really no way to compare these concepts we have, because they are empty of existence, of inherent existence. So if we look at stories in India, we might say those stories are different than ones in China and are different than ones in India. But if we look closely, we actually will find that there is no one story to either country. That if we survey all the people or talk to them, we would hear so many stories. One person, and those stories are not together form a whole. In fact, they're going to contradict each other. or seemingly contradict each other to the mind's eye. And so we have this huge problem that we, anytime we collapse, we actually may be collapsing similarity or difference. And yet we can still do a very rough comparison. But if we ever think that these places are really different from each other, or really the same as each other, we are deluded. In a way, the differences, the vast variety that we get within a country or within a group or within a concept, um, actually are going to be equal to some seemingly mutually exclusive objects. So let me explain. So you might say that um, metal glasses are different than plastic glasses. But if you listed out all the attributes, you would likely have more overlap than difference. Now, if you only listed out the differences, then it might seem to you that they are truly different. And if you only accidentally ended up with a set of attributes that showed the most difference, you would also mistakenly think that they are different. So what happens is, it's not that they're the same or they're different. They're actually beyond sameness and difference. It is our concepts that leave us in this place of contradiction. And if anyone says it is different, then they are talking about a specific set of attributes. And you can believe that there exists a opposite opinion that can be justified by looking at the right set of attributes. So now we go back to why we cannot equate intelligence, or the highest form of intelligence, to knowing facts or heuristics about the world. Because emptiness, this concept that existed in the world before it was a concept, meaning that things do not have inherent characteristics or self-existence, that they are dependent on everything else, meaning China creating a silk trade system, let's say, is completely based on America. I mean, not completely, but partially based on America. You could say that China helped create America, and America helped create China. And you wouldn't be contradicting yourself by some level of inspection. So you could say, if you say I am Chinese, if you think that means you're mutually exclusive and that nothing else has created you but Chinese, it's going to be quite troublesome, and that leads to what's called essentialism. Instead, Chinese has to be made up of nothing but non-Chinese elements. Just like a flower, or hua, is made up of sunshine, dirt, minerals, someone's hands, dead bugs, cow manure, and lots of other things, depending on how it came to be, if you analyze it from the object side. So all of a sudden you have this flower, which is basic identity is not there. And then you try to describe it in terms of what it is it's everything but itself. But then if you also try to describe those things, the components that it's made up of, you also find out that they have the same issue, and it's an infinite regress. So then you say a flower is made out of the sun and the air and the water and all these things that brought it into being. But if you're being honest with your analysis, what it's going to lead to always is every single thing that ever has existed has affected its existence. There's no way out of that. It's not a claim of spiritual claim. It just simply is. Meaning, if you really want to track the causes and conditions, you're going to find out that every single thing that exists is dependent on every um, everything that has ever existed. So I'll say that again. Anything that exists dependent on everything that has already existed. So humans are literally were already here. The basic makeup or the basic components of humans have been here since beginningless time. Before the Big Bang, before there was life, there was not life, but yet life came from non-life elements, and here we are. So with this kind of, let's say it could be perceived as a spooky reality, this strange reality, strange nature of things being not having any thingness, or their thingness being based on everything but itself as a thing, means that any sort of objectification of it as an essential component or having a fact on its own leaves us in the realm of delusion. We hallucinate that these things are objects in and of themselves, made up of themselves having self-existence, which is troublesome. So then, the form of intelligence that perceives this conceptually, or gets this conceptually, is not, I'm giving you these facts about the way the world works, but instead it's actually more complex and beyond my description. Reality is beyond our ability to conceptualize it. This is not a claim of spirituality either. Reality, as we experience it, we experience a kind of illusory or an imagined, right? We imagine that what we're seeing is real, even though it should be obvious to us that we have a very specific sensory apparatus that gives us the world. And the interesting part is that it gives it to us in a way that we perceive it to be out there. We are feel like we're looking outside of this body onto the world, not knowing that the whole structure, from the things I see out there to thinking that I am an I, are all horizontalized. So instead of there being the dichotomy, they're completely horizontalized and even. Every single part of it is equally imagined. It's not that when I look out there, I'm imagining the world, and so then what really is here is my mind. That's all that exists. No, even your mind, even the experience you have of the I, is also imagined. So completely horizontalizing inside and outside. And so, of course, then we cannot have a world where we base the highest form of intelligence on knowing facts and heuristics, because we should see that no matter how many facts you accumulate, no matter how many heuristics you accumulate, um, it escapes reality, because reality is beyond our ability to conceive of it in concepts. So then, what is a higher form of intelligence look like? Krishnamurti once said that the highest form of intelligence is the ability to observe without evaluation. Now let that sit with you. So the ability to observe without evaluation, at first glance, might sound simple, might sound difficult, depending on your consciousness and various causes and conditions. So my interpretation of that is that when we use our intellect too much, the world comes to us and we're objectifying everything and then discriminating, moving it into this or that. So just walking outside, I want to go this way, I want to go that way. It's really good for coordination, right? And knowing where we're going. It really begins to fail us because we overuse it. There is a place for intellect, which is a certain type of intelligence, sure. And but the highest form of intelligence is to allow notions to fall away. This direct experience of the raw sensory input without notions, or even noticing the notions, but seeing the emptiness in them. So if you don't evaluate it, meaning that might be not believing those evaluations or not clinging or getting attached to those evaluations, you can then start to see that it's coming from your own mind. Now, I say that provisionally because even your mind is a concept. It doesn't exist. Not in the way of a self-substantial or self-existing entity. And so when we look at things this way, we do discover that the mind is generating and discriminating and creating pleasure and pain. So when I hear someone, like Zopa Rinpoche wrote in the Eight Worldly Dharmas, when he wrote about the Eight Worldly Dharmas, and when I hear someone praising me or blaming me, and I've practiced this in meditation, you bring up someone praising you, and you bring up someone blaming you. So praising, you are a very wise person. Blaming, you're a very terrible person. So when we have those, they are literally, when experiencing them without evaluations, we can begin to see or experience them as, if I may conceptualize, sounds hitting our eardrums. And at some point, those sounds are transformed into meaning, and it happens so fast we don't even notice it. And then we say, this is a good sound, this is a bad sound, this is a neutral sound. We say, this person gave me a compliment. So those words are empty. When you realize that, and you can only realize this by this practice of non-discriminating. So when you meditate, that's a form of non-discrimination. You're meditating on non-discrimination or emptiness. So when you meditate, you let everything through, totally accept it. You don't even accept it. You don't accept nor reject. You're just there. In some ways, you're like a rock. And when you do that, you begin to notice what happens is what arises is insight. Now, insight isn't coming from intellect analyzing, what's this, what's that. And in fact, me talking about it is kind of undermining the actual experience. Because this is different. So don't. This is a very this is a very bad substitute for the experience. I want you to recognize this, that you have to experience it for yourself. So when you're sitting like a rock, you begin to notice how the so-called mind creates these things, and you can notice that emptiness, that the words are literally just sounds bouncing against your eardrum. And somehow your mind has decided those words are painful. And then pain arises. Then you experience pain. Or your mind translates it, oh, that's very good. And it experiences pleasure. And you might think, I want more of the good stuff rather than the bad stuff. How can I make sure that my mind translate everything into good? And in a way, that's the understanding may not be deep enough, but you can look at the four immeasurables in Buddhism, right? And those are these kind of positive aspects. And you can look at bodhicitta as also a positive aspect. But as a rule, let's say, and you have to experience this for yourself, is that pleasure gives you as much suffering as pain does. Because we begin to cling to pleasure. I love pizza. It's part of my identity. I have to have pizza. I want pizza. I can't believe all the stores are closed because of coronavirus. Where can I get some good pizza? This is not good pizza. It's not like the pizza I had at this place. These people make this pizza better and it tastes better, so I won't have pizza from here. I'll have pizza from there. Oh, I can't wait to have pizza today. And I can't wait to get over this dumb work that I'm doing that's so monotonous. I can't wait until I'm going to have pizza. But this is utterly painful to be doing this work right now and imagining that I'm having pizza in the future. Getting what you don't want is suffering, and getting what you do want is suffering. And I really like that, and it took me a while to experience that that was true for me. And so we have this intelligence that we must cultivate, especially those of us who have over prioritized intellect, knowing through facts, knowing through discriminating between this and that, looking at objects in the world as if they were real and determining that they have fixed attributes that you can always rely on. And as I said earlier, the Buddha said impermanence. Things are impermanent. So even whatever attribute you give it, maybe it works for a while, it will eventually come off. I was reading a Mandarin story, or a story in Mandarin, who talked about a guy who went back to his hometown to have mianbao that he had when he was younger. And it didn't taste the same, and he wondered where those people had gone, and he felt so sad because he had this idea in his mind that he'd been clinging to, that if he only had this mianbao, that he would get back to that place where he was happy and free. But that day never comes. And in a way, like Alan Watts says, the ideas never come to fruition in the way that we imagine them to. So in this way, we have to really consider, are we cultivating this intelligence, this ability to observe our experience without evaluation, dropping notions or allowing notions to rise and fall, not giving them the attention we so often do. And so if we can practice this, it leads to, uh, in one practice the right way, it leads to a significant amount of clarity and less suffering. And the last thing I'll say is we have these two levels, and of course these are provisional. And if they're helpful, use them. If they're not, they just see them as a dream. And the first level is we see things. It's like when I'm eating kale, I can experience myself as being the eater of kale. And usually we feel kind of zoomed in. Is this kale good? We take kale as an object. Is this kale going to be good? Is it fresh? And for me, I don't um, have those sort of categories when it comes to food like that. But I can kind of provide a hypothetical of, okay, is it good? Oh, it's kind of crunchy. So we're taking the object as, we're taking kale as the object of our consciousness. And there's a way in which we can continue to step back until there isn't a duality. And you could almost call that stepping forward. Um, and so there's, as soon as there's the kale, you think there's only the kale because you're the subject, and you're like, you don't see the duality. You're blinded to the fact that you've already discriminated between yourself and the kale. And now the kale becomes the thing that you evaluate. You could step back from that and see yourself as, look how you experience yourself as a subject over an object, without trying to say good or bad, just observing that and how that dichotomy arises. So, yeah, in this episode, we really focused on uh, cultivating this practice of non discrimination, cultivating this practice of observing without evaluation as one of the highest forms of intelligence. So I really advocate for you to go in search of this intelligence, and not really just in search of it, but just to meditate, whatever practices you think can get at this without using conceptual mind to analyze and slice and dice everything. Can we experience our partner without taking them as an object and slicing them into this or that at different times, as being a good girlfriend or being a good boyfriend or being a good partner or being a bad partner, bad girlfriend, bad boyfriend? Can we let go of our notions? What I like to practice is when I'm with people to totally let go. And for me, I think more and more it happens just spontaneously. But if it doesn't happen spontaneous for you, what you can do is just when you're with someone, the duality can drop away and you can kind of just completely forget that you actually exist and the other person in some way barely exists, but you're completely present to every sound that they make. And so that means you're not thinking intellectually so much. You're not like, what should I say next? What should I say after this? What should I do after this? What facial expression should I make? Was that too erratic? Was that polite? Oh, this person, or evaluating this person is a bad person. Can't believe they did that. Wow, this person is telling me this. Does that mean I'm a good person? So letting go of the evaluations, and maybe as a first practice, just completely be there for all evaluations. Observe them. Don't evaluate the evaluations. And over time, perhaps you can get to a place where I think it's kind of my usual um, when my mind is in a good place, where it's just like you're a rock. You have there's no fear, absolutely no fear present. There's no planning. What should I say after this, after that? There is just a opening. And you just sit like that, experiencing yourself as an opening, not as conceptually I'm an opening, but literally just being the opening. And see if you can do that without evaluating what what the other person has to say, or what you should say, without evaluating yourself, without evaluating them. Just being. See if you can practice that sort of deep listening, dropping in. So that's it for this episode of the Art of Non-Discrimination podcast. I will see you next time. It's Christian Family Ramsey. See you soon.